Well, it's quite clear by watching both candidates' response that this has affected this campaign. And it's brought up extremely important points and issues that this country continues to face. But as I was watching that, I thought it was so neat to watch you, Eric, watching your father, and I think you're probably doing a whole lot of that these days. But that being said, do you talk to him when we saw these shootings happen and we continue to see the unrest in Charlotte? How much do you talk to your father about that and get his ideas on this?
Listen, a lot. I mean, we speak to him a lot. The reality is there's about 1.2 million law enforcement officers in this country. And every day they do a great job for the citizens of this nation. There's just no question about it. I mean, there's not a day that you can't see a cop taking a fallen law enforcement officer's child to school because their father or their mother was killed in some shooting by some criminal. I mean, they just do amazing things. They're amazing people. They do so much charitable work. I mean, they keep law and order in this society. Once in a while you have bad apple, right? I don't think anybody can not acknowledge that happens. Once in a while you also have a mistake that happens, and there's no one that can't acknowledge that happens. But by and large, they're amazing people. If you were to take Wall Street and you were to put them in blue uniforms, I can tell you the problem would be substantially worse. I mean, they really are good people, and I think my father's point is we have to support law enforcement. We have to support law enforcement. At the same time, Hillary has been totally absent from so many of these communities. I mean, my father's been going into Center City, Detroit, and speaking to the African-American community. I mean, so many of these communities have been totally left behind. And I'm not just saying Republican versus Democrat here. I'm just saying by past administrations for the last 30, 50, 100 years, these communities have been totally left behind. It's why in certain cities you have 60% African-American youth who are unemployed. It's why you have to walk through 3 metal detectors and to walk into some of these schools. And it's just a very, very sad thing.
You raise an interesting point, but let me read you a quote that your father's running mate gave just a few days ago. And this is the quote from Mike Pence, your vice presidential candidate. Donald Trump and I both believe there's been far too much talk of institutional bias and racism in law enforcement. Does your father really believe that? Because I'm going to give you a statistic. Vox analyzed FBI data from 2012. 31% of police killings were of black people, who only comprise 13% of the population. Based on that data, and I know you're a data guy because of what you do for a living, is there really too much talk of institutional bias and racism when we see an unarmed man being shot just this week, the police officer charged with manslaughter as a result of that shooting? After that, and after the data that I just read to you, really, can you stand here and say, and your father...
I'm not a data guy as it pertains to shootings.
Well, this is data I'm reading to you.
It's obviously not what I do.
But do you stand by what Mike Pence said?
You see that one shooting in Oklahoma, and there was nothing good about that shooting in Oklahoma. It looked like the officer choked or something. Who knows what happened there? That clearly didn't look like a good shooting. I don't think anybody's going to say that's a good shooting, and that's why that person's obviously, charged with that. I think the point that's being made is all too often the first line of narrative to come to, and it's been used against my father for months and months and months, is you say anything. You go into you're not in an African-American community, and you're racist for not being in the African-American community. You go in, and then you give a speech in a African-American church in Detroit, and all of a sudden you're pandering, and now you're racist. And I think all too often what frustrates me as a civilian is you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And the narrative coming one way, and it's always come toward the Republicans, is here you are, and you're filled with race, and you're filled with hate, and you're filled with bigotry. And that's simply not the case.
But are we talking about it too much, as Mike Pence suggests? Are we discussing this issue too much?
I think the accusation is thrown toward one side way too often, and I think that's really sad. I think we're people. We're Americans, first and foremost. We have a great country. We have great communities. We should have great schools. We should have great wealth. We should have great jobs.
We're not
and that's really my father's message. Let's put America first again, and let's put all communities first, and let's not leave certain sections of the communities behind.